Hi, welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. This is Len Edgerly. Today is Friday, July 16th, 2021, and I'm coming to you from Ocean Park, Maine, looking out at the ocean as it gets kind of dark out there. What time is it? 8:45. My guest this week is Rob Drake, who is the new president of the Ocean Park Association. That's an organization that goes way back into the last century and is still active and is a big part of why this community, which is a part of Old Orchard Beach, Maine, it has just such a intriguing, calm quality to it. And I had a chance to talk to Rob about that. And it turns out he's also someone who goes to Sanibel each winter with his wife. So we've had a coincidence there to talk about. Later in this episode, I'm going to talk to you about a change that I've decided to make in the Kindle Chronicles. And I'll save that till the end of the show if you want to skip ahead. It's not earth-shattering, but it is a change which I made this summer that is in line with some of the other exploration I'm doing of unplugging from the net in my See You in September project. I will mention that there was news this week. The Kindle Vella platform is now live, and if you Google Kindle Vella, you'll be taken to a place where you can start reading these serial creations, which anyone can make through Kindle Direct Publishing. And there are some fantastic ones. The one that I've been reading is by Hugh Howey. Next week, I will be speaking with someone from the Kindle Vella team to describe the thinking behind it, the strategy, what kinds of things you'll find there. And I think it's a pretty dramatic new platform. And I can tell from reading Hugh Howey's Death and Life, a biography, which is what he's put up there, that it's given him a chance to tell his story in a new way. And he compares it himself in one of the episodes or one of the chapters that it reminds him of the excitement he had when he was writing Wool and was having his life changed by the whole self-publishing Kindle Direct Publishing platform. So that's going to be something that we'll hear more about next week. Let's turn to the interview. When I asked my Ocean Park friend Jeff Shute to recommend someone to talk about our fair village here for today's show, he suggested Rob Drake, the brand new president of the Ocean Park Association. As you will hear, Rob was born in Texas and grew up in Ohio, and he has been coming to Ocean Park since 1968 when he came here with his future wife, Nancy. I connected with Rob by Zoom on Tuesday, July 13th, and that was the day when we were both juggling our schedules with the opportunity to spend time with our grandchildren. That's a time-honored activity here. I always enjoy learning how people find their way to Ocean Park, so I began by asking Rob for a brief summary of his growing up, his education, and his career.
I grew up in two places. I was born in Texas and lived there until I was 13. My father's family had been very early settlers in Texas. They were there when it was still a province of Mexico. They had begun to drift in with the other American settlers who came. That's who they were.
What part of Texas was that?
I was born in Waco, and that had sort of been the old family seat for a long time, although I actually grew up in Austin. My parents moved to Austin, and that's where I remember living, although my grandmother and I had a couple of aunts and uncles in Waco, so we spent a lot of time visiting Waco, so familiar place to us as children. So then when I was 12 years old, my father was offered a position in Ohio, and my mother was from Ohio, and so we moved to a little town called Banville, Ohio, which is east of Columbus, where Denison University is located. And my mother had grown up in the county seat 6 miles away, so for her it was pretty much coming home. So I had known my paternal relatives in Texas, and I came up, and here was this grandfather who I'd only seen once or twice because travel in the 50s used to be a lot harder than it is now. So anyway, so we moved to Ohio, and that's then where I went to school. Went to high school and also went to college in Ohio. I went to law school, and after I had finished law school, kind of to my surprise and my wife's surprise, we decided to go back to the town where I had grown up. And so we returned to Granville and have lived there ever since. I took a job working as a lawyer in a small firm in Newark, the county seat town. And in what was not an unusual expectation in the early 1970s, but ended up being unusual, I took one job and never left. And I retired from the same firm 45 years later.
Wow.
As I say, that was kind of what a lot of people, when I was finishing law school, expected they would do. But as the world changed, very few people did. But anyway, I did, because I just never saw a green pasture. So that's what I did.
Did you go to in college Ohio State and the law school somewhere else, or what was
I went to college at a small college called the College of Worcester. It was in northern Ohio, and then I went to the University of Michigan Law School.
I see. And then back to Ohio. And have had a lot of fun being a Michigan football fan in Ohio all these years. People in Michigan don't understand how excited a lot of people in the Midwest get about college football. I don't get that excited, but I've enjoyed kind of being a burr under other people's saddles all these years. And, you know how to upset those bucks, huh?
Being a Michigan fan and wearing my Michigan necktie or bow tie or whatever, and so forth.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It's fun here. And there are a surprising number of Michigan people who sneak around in Central Ohio. Well, anyway, one summer when I was in college, in terms of my path to Ocean Park, I spent the summer in Norway at the University of Oslo, and that's where I met my wife, who was from Boston but was also spending the summer there. And so that's where we met each other, and that's what led me to Ocean Park.
Now, so she did she grow up in Ohio, or was it the previous generations?
She grew up in Belmont. In Boston.
Oh, Belmont, yeah. Yeah, I went to Belmont Hill School. I know where that is.
All right, well.
Yeah. So you met in Norway,
right.
And as I understand it, her family had been coming to Ocean Park for quite a while at the time you met her?
Yes, they had. Her mother had first been brought here by her grandmother in the early 1930s. And then after Nancy and her sister were born, her parents came here regularly, and in the late 1950s, they built their cottage back here in the woods at the end of Free Street. And it's a cottage that Nancy and I have altered a little bit, but it's the same one. And so we're still in her maiden name was Lindberg, and we're still in the Lindbergh's family cottage back here in the woods. Her sister is now next door, so which is nice that we can see our sister-in-law and brother-in-law a lot. So,
you bet. So, when did you first have a chance to visit Ocean Park? Is it sometime after you'd met Nancy?
Yes, it was. Actually, I first saw Ocean Park in this late spring of 1968. We had gone to Boston to tell her parents that we were going to get married. And we had one spare day between driving to the East Coast from Ohio and driving back. And Nancy went to school in New York, dropping her off, and then my going back on to Ohio. And she said, we have to go to Ocean Park. So we drove up to Ocean Park and drove around and, looked at the beach and so forth, and looked at Ocean Park, and then went home. And that summer, after my summer work was finished, I came back east and actually spent a week here for the first time, and actually got to get the rhythm of Ocean Park, at least a tiny bit.
What were your first impressions when you showed up and first saw it?
Yeah, the very first time I saw it, I still remember we came coming down from the turnpike and across the railroad tracks. I was just kind of astonished by the size of the density of the pine trees as I came into Ocean Park for the first time. It just seemed... no, I wouldn't say enchanted, but I thought, what a wonderful forest setting this is. And then we came down and looked at the beach, and I had not spent much time around beaches as a kid. There are very few beaches to be seen in Ohio, and the ones on
or Waco,
are not maybe worth visiting too much. So anyway, the beach was new, and I had probably had the impression that a number of people do, which is that Maine is entirely made up of rocky coast and rocky headlands and so forth, and suddenly here's this immense wide beach that seems to go on forever in either direction from Ocean Park. So those were the two things that I remember most being struck by coming here at that first time and just seeing it for a quick visit and then heading home.
Did you end up migrating to Ocean Park each summer in the subsequent years when you were living in Ohio?
Yeah, pretty much. We would come, and we were sort of the standard week visit, maybe 2 weeks or so, that we would drive to the East Coast most every summer with the children.
That's a long drive.
That's about 900 miles. And then as our kids got older, we would usually send one of them to Ocean Park, and they got to have a private week with their grandparents because they weren't able to see Nancy's parents all the time in Ohio. So each of the kids could come. We have 3 children, and that way they could come and have some undifferentiated time with their grandparents without having to deal with standard sibling rivalry problems. So they all got
what a great solution! I bet they really looked forward to their turn to come.
And they knew exactly whose turn it was to come to come and have the private visit. That was so very firmly in mind.
Was there any opportunity to try to trade years in return for a bag of marbles or anything?
Well, if there was, they didn't tell us about it. We weren't invited in the discussion if there was, but I don't think there was.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
But anyway, it worked out well, and they all kind of got indoctrinated at Ocean Park. Both of our girls came to love Maine enough that one ended up going to Colby and one went to Bates. So we ended up providing two college kids to Maine as well. Right.
And then you have a son as well?
He did not. He went to MIT.
He didn't go to college in Maine, though.
He sort of absorbed his visits with his grandparents in Boston and went to MIT. So,
that's a pretty good choice if you can't go to college in Maine. It's
MIT. Like MIT.
My dad's an MIT man, so
yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole different world. Huh. Well, the Ocean Park Association, how far back does that go? Would that have been in existence in 1968 when you first came out here?
Ocean Park in the late 19th century, a lot of different religious organizations got involved in what were called summer assembly programs, where they would provide a place that people who followed that particular faith could come for the summer. And a group of people called Free Will Baptists, who have since evolved into the American Baptist Convention, found a strip of land that went from the railroad tracks to the beach and bought it. I think it was 50 acres or something. I've forgotten, but right along Temple Avenue and Colby Avenue, and bought that. And that was in 1881, and they built the temple that first summer. And it seems a little astonishing to me, but the idea was that people were going to come and live in tents and then go to the temple for various activities. If you look at the old buildings, you see a lot of them that have dates from the 1880s, so the tent idea must not have lasted very long. People exactly spent a lot of time.
That might not have been a way to lure a lot of people to come to the site.
But anyway, by 1900, they were calling themselves Chautauqua by the Sea because the Chautauqua Institute in New York had sort of flowered as the leading one of these summer assembly type places. And the Ocean Park Association has been going ever since. This is our 141st season that we've kicked off this year. So we're still going. And the idea of the Chautauqua movements, and there are actually a growing number of Chautauquas in the United States. At one time, there was a huge number, and then it collapsed, and now there are fewer new ones are being founded. but the idea is to have religious programming, educational programming, music opportunities, and recreational opportunities. And while the OPA has evolved and does some other things, that's broadly speaking, that's what we're still trying to do, that same sort of thing. The emphasis, the balance between the different areas may have changed some over time, but broadly speaking, that's what we're still trying to do.
I think we visited, we used to live in Denver, and
yes,
was
there is one
still going on in Boulder or
one
up
of
in
the
that
members
area?
of our association here has been, and maybe right now, I'm not certain, the president of the Chautauqua Alliance of this group. There are about 15 now that are functioning, and I know people have been to meetings at the Chautauqua in Colorado.
Now, does OPA consider itself,
no,
is it considered a Chautauqua still, or has it evolved to something different?
Affiliated with the Free Will Baptist. It's now non-denominational, but it is still considered to be a Chautauqua. And we still try to follow those same 4 programming leads.
Yeah. Let's talk about the temple. It's such an unusual building. You come off the highway and you come down that wonderful strip of land. I didn't realize that they had bought that whole strip of land. That explains why it's been preserved. The trees are even bigger now than they were in 1968. And you come up on this building on the left just before Ocean Park central area. How would you describe to that building to somebody who'd never seen it before?
Well, what I say to people is that sort of the community is sort of centered around an octagonal wooden church, summer only, it's uninsulated, with an open roof system that we've had a couple of architects visit us who love to come in and look up and see how the roof structure looks like a spider web of beams works, built in 1881. It has been worked on since and expanded, but by and large, it's exactly the same as it was then, including a lot of those hard, kind of uncomfortable benches and chairs that they bought. I think the benches they bought for $1 a foot from somebody would make you a hard bench for $1 a foot. But the whole thing was built, I think, in 6 weeks. I didn't look all this up, so I'm going from memory. I think it was built in 6 weeks and built for, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 and thrown together. And there it is, 100 years later, still functioning.
Has it ever been damaged by hurricane, or what's been? I know,
and there have been a couple of times that trees have fallen very close to the temple, but I don't know that it has ever suffered serious damage. Some of the other buildings have. Porter Hall, which is one of the buildings adjacent to it, was hit by a tree a couple of years ago and smashed through the roof, and that was an interesting project getting that fixed. But to my knowledge, the temple has never suffered significant damage. I would think the most anxious time ever in the temple, at some point they decided to show movies there, which probably would have horrified the 1881 Baptists. But anyway, they decided to do it, and in order to show movies, they cut the center post off, because the post used to come down in the center of the temple, a big old white pine log. And they had some engineer who said, no, you can put a series of braces that go out to the walls and carry the weight down, and you can do that. But I suspect I've always suspected that people wondered when they actually cut the post out whether the whole thing was going to collapse like a house of cards.
Wow, that's a lot of faith in that engineer's opinion. Huh.
Anyway, so but it's still there, and.
It's interesting because over the years that we've been up here, we used to, my mother was a great friend of Peter Gomes, the preacher at Harvard, and he would come up every summer and he would give just the most entertaining sermon. You know, he'd always point out that Maine had been part of Massachusetts, and so everybody should have some respect for, and, but as I understand it, that's the summer program at the temple. And what does the committee or the people making that decision look for when they're deciding? And the minister gets to stay in a nice house, and I imagine it's kind of a sought after or kind of a good gig for a preacher to come. But how are the decisions made on who to invite?
There's a committee that makes the selections, and they try to bring in a variety of people with a variety of views. So this year, there's a Catholic nun preached. I think last week we were out of town. I wasn't able to see that. There's a rabbi is preaching later in the summer, and but by and large, it's a Protestant pulpit, but not entirely. Yeah. And there's a committee that works on that. Also, our executive director, Jerry Goslin, was formerly a Catholic priest, and so he has contacts and knows people in that world, and so I think he probably gives them a lot of advice. But I know they accept recommendations from people who say, "Hey, well, here's a terrific preacher, and think about this one."
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. Now, you are on your second day as president of the OPA, having been installed at the annual meeting Saturday.
Right.
Have you had to face any big crises yet?
Not yet. I think I just heard a box of marbles get dropped in the hall, so I may face one when we're done. But no, I haven't had any crises yet. So,
what do you see as the biggest challenge? And now, are you on a 2-year term, or what's the president's term look like?
The formal term is 1 year. The expectation has been that people will serve 3 consecutive 1-year terms.
I see.
I've just finished 3 years as vice president, and assuming I'm not impeached or something, I'm willing to go on and follow that expectation and do this for 3 years. I think the challenges, one that we face is one that I think is broadly faced by any organization that has a quasi-religious tie these days, which is the trend in mainline Protestant churches for declining membership and declining support. And so we are going to be faced, I think, by the same thing. We're not completely unique, and so we'll have to look at how we continue to make the religious parts of what we do meaningful to the people that want those to be meaningful. So that's one challenge we'll have. I think we need to realize that, again, any organization needs to look toward transitioning to newer and younger members. And there's a process going on right now, a strategic planning process, where they are seeking input from anybody who's interested in Ocean Park via a survey, which you can find on the Ocean Park web page. And one thing we're really interested in is hearing what younger people, the next generation of people who have family connections, or maybe just people who have come to visit here, are interested in, what they find meaningful, what they'd like to see changed and implemented over time. So we hope to learn from them how to evolve ourselves with changing times. I think maybe not all, almost all voluntary organizations face the potential financial challenges. We rely primarily on the generosity of our members, both through their membership dues and through an annual fund appeal that we have. One of the interesting things that we have that's different than maybe a lot of other voluntary organizations, we own most of the commercial property in the center part of Ocean Park, so we are commercial landlords for the soda fountain and the grocery store. So we have to stop being good guys and become landlords occasionally. We also own the Ocean Park Realty real estate agency. And last year during the pandemic, that was not just a help to us, but in most years, that's a source of support for the association also. So we kind of have ourselves spread out on several different platforms or several different legs in the way of support, but the primary support is from our members on the annual basis. We do have an endowment that's managed now by the Portland Trust Company in Portland, and we draw on that endowment every year, also for some support, not a huge amount of support, but in our world, we're glad to get any level of support that we can. We're going to be studying over the next year or two, trying to get a handle on what our capital needs may be, looking to project those forward to see when the more serious capital needs will come up, and then we'll have to figure out how to address those.
This would be maintenance of the buildings mainly?
Yeah, exactly. Maintenance of the buildings, but also technology. It used to be that, technology for an organization like this was a box of ballpoint pens and maybe every decade a typewriter, and that's not true anymore. We now have Wi-Fi in the temple and the programming buildings, and we're showing the temple services live, and so we've changed a lot of those things. Jakeman Hall, we can do Zoom meetings and so forth.
Yeah.
So technology, and as you know a lot better than I do, technology wears out at a distressingly fast rate. And if we have expectations during the short summer season, we spend all winter planning for this 11 or 12-week summer season. We need to be ready to have things work then, if at all possible. So that'll be another part of that review of what our capital needs are. But we're trying to keep ourselves relevant for present visitors and trying to, as best we can, determine what might be of interest to future visitors as we look forward.
Now, I think you mentioned that, do you also spend some time or have spent some time in the past on Sanibel down in Florida?
I do. My wife and I do. Sanibel is sort of well known in Granville because a group of people from Granville built a condominium there in the 1970s, and all the units belonged to people from our community. So there were Granville is a small town of 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people. So there were plenty of talking about going to Sanibel, and at some point, probably 25 years ago, my wife and I, having heard this, thought, well, we'll stop in Sanibel sometime, and we stopped, and we have been there for a piece of almost every winter since. We usually find our way down. We spent some time on Sanibel every year. Yeah.
Well, in my experience, we spent last winter there. We're hoping to buy a place on Sanibel. We got a condo in Denver. We're moving, and of course, and I spent a lot of time in Ocean Park. There's something similar about the two places, and I'm curious what your sense of that would be, and also what's different about them.
Well, I suppose let me start with what seems to me to be most different, and then I'll move to what we find to be similar. I think the thing that's most different is that Sanibel is a daytime destination for a lot of people who have occasion to come there, and they want to come and shop or see the beach or whatever they want to do. And Ocean Park has people who come in from the campgrounds, but it doesn't have the magnet draw that a Sanibel would. And that's, to me, that's the biggest difference. I suppose the similarities are that if you want to find a quiet place to get settled, that they work. When Nancy and I get to Sanibel, our car will not be driven for a week, 10 days. We don't go off the island. Mm-hmm. We ride our bicycle to the grocery store. We load up on staples before we get there and just ride to the grocery for milk and bread and so forth. So you can be very sort of bicycle and foot oriented, pedestrian oriented in both places. We enjoy, particularly on Sanibel, the natural parts of it, that so much of the natural world is so accessible. The place we stay is right at the end of Tarpon Bay on West Gulf, and so we can go walk in the Bailey Tract every evening before supper just to see what birds might be around.
Wow.
And walk on the beautiful beach. And similarly, Ocean Park, and I have to say, when I was first coming here and when my kids were little, I didn't appreciate it. But we have this wonderful marsh that's right beside and right in the middle of the town, but beside the town, where you can see the natural Maine coast in a wonderful way, and the great beaches for walking. So we find both of them very relaxing. And then I guess Sanibel, as you know, is one of the rare places in Florida that does not have large buildings along the coastline. And that was something that was very attractive to us when we first went there, just because the human footprint isn't quite as intrusive. And Ocean Park is the same way. I mean, you have woods here and marsh, and it's all mixed together. And while people live here and enjoy being here, it's not as intrusive a footprint as it is some other places in Maine. But that's another common element that we enjoy.
There's something about the culture or something fairly intangible that strikes me as similar. And it's hard to even articulate it without just going into cliches, family oriented. We don't lock our doors here, and we didn't lock our doors in the places we rented on Sanibel. So there's sort of a safety feeling to it, almost back in time. And in some ways, I think people in both places prize that as much as anything. And it may be the least, the toughest thing to protect or maintain, that if you knew what are the 5 things you do so that 10 or 20 years from now, someone who comes to Ocean Park or Sanibel will have that same set of emotions about how calming and restorative and full of kind of hope they are when they're there. Do you have any sense of that?
Well, absolutely. And I think when you use the word calming, that was what I was going to say. I think both places are places that promote a calm atmosphere, so that I know that when I arrive in either place, I can sort of exhale and say, whoa, here I am now. I can just relax and really relax, and I'm under no pressure. And they're very unpressured environments. Obviously, I'm no longer working, so I'm not as pressured as I once was, but both of them are great places that people can actually relax. And I think for all of us, having places in our lives that are where you can relax and have some peace and kind of gather yourself are really useful and important if it's possible. Everybody's life isn't constructed in such a way that they can do that. But I think Sanibel and Ocean Park both offer those. And that's why we want to try our best to continue to make Ocean Park relevant for younger, newer people, so that's what you were saying, so they can come here and get that same feeling. And they may not get it out of the same programming that older people got. I mean, some people may have found that their peace in Ocean Park was purely related to the religious programming or to the music programming and something. Well, those are going to evolve over time. But hopefully we'll be able to keep enough different things on the table that we can draw people here.
Yeah, just that history of the Chautauqua having those various elements to kind of balance each other. I would think that gives a higher chance of success at maintaining it, because you don't know which one is going to prove to be the crucial support of the stool. And
I think exactly. And at any point in time, one leg is going to, be stronger than another. And we'd be ill-advised to assume that we know what people are going to want in 25 or 30 years.
Well, my experience of the calming of Ocean Park is perhaps balanced or complemented by the fact I have 3 grandsons. One of them's 15. He's working at the soda fountain this summer, James. And then I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they're boys in the next cottage. And when they come over, it's, Grandpa, can we play video games? And it's just go, go, go until I drop. And then Darlene is much more of an outdoor person, and she runs around the playing tag and stuff with them. But there's a lot of energy that a grandfather gets to draw on, in addition to the ability to find some calming, restorative aspects. What do you have any kind of a formula for balancing those 2 parts of your life up here?
No. When I figured out, I'll pass it along.
You need to write a book.
It's just the richness of the experience of seeing the grandchildren and seeing their curiosity about the world, and then seeing their their view of it evolve over time is fascinating. But the relaxation starts again when they go home or go next door maybe.
I think maybe sometimes we used to have a system where we would put a bucket on the railing here at this cottage. And if the bucket was up, it meant the coast was clear, the kids could come over. And if the bucket wasn't up, it meant we were napping or something.
Yeah, give us a break, yeah. Our oldest is now 14 and is now busy surfing, and it's just been interesting to see how he evolved from, wanting us to dig a pool for him at the low tide, and now out there riding on a surfboard. So,
well, which place, given that the grandchildren probably come here more than Sanibel, do you get to read more books when you're in Sanibel than when you're here?
Yes. Yeah, I do. My reading is more restricted here. It's restricted to the time before they get here, not completely, but more so. But Sanibel is a great place to read. I always lug a lot of books down there and have put books in my Kindle, and then I inevitably go to that little mystery bookstore.
Oh yeah.
And think, what do I need with more books? But here are 3 or 4 books. I think, I can buy that. And I can't resist a bookstore, so I always end up, I can't go in one and not buy something. And so then I have to quickly in Sanibel wolf down the new Sanibel books before I get to all the ones I brought along.
And you've got I don't read any books on paper. I'm starting to read magazines. I've got an Economist subscription I've started this summer. But you're reading some of your books on Kindle and some on paper, it sounds like. I
looked back and seeing your question, and I keep a record of all the books that I read. And I read about half. About half of them are on Kindle, and about half of them are still in paper. And since our library, and I'm sure libraries all over the country now are doing this, but since our library at home then began to offer books electronically, I find that I am buying vastly fewer books and reading more. That I go to our local library in Ohio, which is part of a consortium with several other communities, and load the books into my Kindle, and away I go.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my favorite story of loading books, though, is just showing how a person of my age can be astonished by the modern world. We were in Jordan a couple of winters ago, and we were driving from Amman down to Petra, which, if you've been there, is a couple of hours in the desert in a bus, part of a tour group. And the tour guide had recommended a book to me about an aspect of Middle Eastern history I was interested in. And I'm on the bus reading, and suddenly I realized that all I'd gotten was the sample. And I thought, oh my God, now the sample is done, and I've got another 2 hours in the desert on the bus. And then I thought, wait, the bus has Wi-Fi, so I link the Kindle to the Wi-Fi, go to Amazon, order the book, and in 20 seconds, riding along on a bus in the desert in Jordan, here's the book.
That's fantastic.
I just went back to my reading spot and kept going, so it's fun.
Yeah. No, that's, I still am. There was magic when it first came out, 12, 13 years ago now. And it still sort of seems like magic when
to me, exactly. Just how, and I think about my grandchildren my 2 grandsons on a rainy morning are sitting over there around the corner with the cottage their parents are renting, both buried in their Kindles reading away. And they don't think it's magic at all. They just assume that it's how the world works.
Yeah.
And it is, and they don't see it as magical. But I'm kind of glad I got to see the transition, the wonder of some of this technology a little bit more than they do.
Yeah. Can you recommend a couple of books you're reading? What have you read so far that you've enjoyed this summer?
I went in, again, not needing a new book, went in just to say hello to the librarian here in Ocean Park, and here was Ben Macintyre's newest book called Agent Sonya. Ben Macintyre is English and writes true stories about English spies and espionage, mostly during the Second World War. Sonya was actually a Soviet spy who lived in England for a while and was instrumental in leaking all the atomic secrets to the Russians.
Wow.
Anyway, he writes fascinating books, and I would give any of his books high marks, but that's the one that I just finished reading. I'm lately on to enjoying John Banville, who's an Irish author, and saw that he wrote a book called Mrs. Osmond, which reviewers were saying was a great follow-up effort on Henry James, The Portrait of a Lady. Well, I have to confess I'd never read The Portrait of a Lady, so I thought, well, I can't really read Banville until I read The Portrait of a Lady. So that was one it was out of copyright, so you can just go to the store and download those for nothing or for 99 cents or something. So I just finished reading The Portrait of a Lady and then read John Banville's take on Mrs. Osmond, which is amusing. But he's a good one. We read, and I try not to read them at a breakneck pace, but we love Donna Leone and her mysteries set in Venice with Inspector Brunettti. I have enjoyed, I read the first one years and years ago, and then I fairly recently got started again reading the series of books about Maisie Dobbs, written by a woman named, I think, Winspear, I think is her name in English. Excuse me, an English woman who now lives in the United States, but Maisie Dobbs is a combination detective and psychologist anyway.
Oh.
So that's sort of, lighter fare. And then I'm given to, reading sort of heavy historical fare sometime. That was my non-legal training was a historian, and I still enjoy reading that. And
yeah, any particular period usually draws your interest in history?
I guess my interest is most drawn to the period around the American Revolution. I'm also interested in genealogy and had a lot of ancestors who were here. Nobody who was leading a regiment, but they were they were the drudges in the tents, in fact. And but I'm particularly interested in the sort of the evolution of American society, both how people live, but also politically how it actually evolved to the point in time that the revolution came. So anything that Gordon Wood writes or Bernard Bailyn writes or some of these guys, I'm
right
to buy anything that they publish. So they're going to be too old to publish anything, so I need to move on to the younger generation.
Yeah. My dad's reading a Gordon Wood book about Jefferson and Adams that he's really loving.
I have read that one, and that's a fascinating one.
Yeah.
And anything he writes is fascinating. So
yeah,
like my observation of the at least historical world is though that I suspect in publishing that there's been a shrinkage in the number of editors because I now find a fair number of books, realizing that I'm an amateur at this, but still I think, boy, this is a book at 800 pages that would have really been a great 600-page book, and it really needed more aggressive editing to really tie it together and really make it work. And so I read the whole thing anyway, but I have a feeling that publishing houses have been cashiering editors. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I know nothing about the publishing industry, but that's my guess anyway.
Yeah, it takes a lot longer to write a short book.
Yeah, exactly. Thomas Jefferson once advised somebody who was interested in becoming a lawyer that never use two words when one word will do. And I used to preach that to the young lawyers who worked for me or with me and for me without a lot of success, I would know.
But you've got a sharp eye for are you seeing more typos in books that you're reading? I imagine you read that closely.
I see more typos and I see more simple historical errors. I read a book by a woman who's very, very highly regarded and a good book and a good premise and full of silly historical errors. And I was astonished. I actually wrote to her thinking I'd never find her. And I just fished around on the internet and found an address for her and wrote and thought I'd never hear. And fairly shortly I heard back and said, those will be corrected in the next edition. So I haven't looked at another edition. I hope they were, because they were just the sort of things that shouldn't be in a well-written history. You shouldn't have little mistakes.
They detract from the credibility of the whole project.
They do. And if you have a few picky readers like me, for me, it was like hitting a big pothole on a bicycle, and I was jarred by it when I was going along enjoying the history. They think, oh, wait, we have that wrong, and so.
That's good. Well, anything else that we didn't mention about Ocean Park, or that you'd like to make sure that we pass along to people that might have a chance to listen?
Well, if anyone's listening who has any connection to Ocean Park, I'd say take the survey, because we're very interested in knowing what everybody thinks about Ocean Park.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So it'll be easy for them to get it.
We're really interested in getting as broad a sampling as we can of where people is good and not so good and directions we might be going.
I've taken a 90-day vow of cyber celibacy, I'll call it, of not going on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram until September 8th. So normally I put the episode up, like the Sanibel episodes, I put up on the Sanibel website, which has like 30,000 members. And there's a very lively Ocean Park Facebook community, but I'm not going to be able to do it. So I'm going to send the link to Jeff Shute, our common friend, and he's very active on Facebook. So hopefully we'll put this in front of some of the Facebookers from Ocean Park.
Yeah, I am not an active Facebooker, so I hope people who are will find it of some interest, though.
Good. I trust they will. Well, thanks very much, Rob. I have been speaking with Rob Drake, president of the Ocean Park Association. This has been a pleasure, and good luck in your new term.
Oh, well, then, thanks. It's my pleasure as well. Hope to see you on the beach or around Ocean Park.
If you have a connection to Ocean Park, you might want to check out the link in the show notes that will take you to the survey that Rob mentioned. I emailed it to my grandson James, who's working at the Ocean Park Soda Fountain this summer. At 15, he is the youngest member of the crew, and he's doing a great job learning where all the flavors are and scooping, reaching down deep into the bins and coming up with ice cream for cones. And, man, that place serves a lot of ice cream in the summer, I'll say that. He loves it, and I'm sure his answers to the survey will be of interest to Rob and the rest of the board of the OPA. I didn't know in advance that Rob also spends time in Sanibel. That was a nice coincidence that gave us a chance to compare the two places. One difference is that the ocean temperature, when Darlene and I and her sister Deb were on Sanibel this past winter, it hit 65 degrees in about January, and today, mid-July, it was also 65 degrees. The exact same temperature, but at a very different time of the year. And I had a good half-hour swim in my shorty wetsuit here in the 65-degree temperature. The water's a lot rougher here always because we're on the Atlantic, and the Gulf Coast of Florida generally has smoother water for swimming. But I love that temperature. It's refreshing when I get out. I've had a good exercise, and then I really feel refreshed and tend to sleep pretty good at night. I noticed that on the OPA website, there's going to be a music performance Sunday night in the band shell, which is like a gazebo next to the library on the little village. And if it isn't raining, we might walk down there with my daughter and her family and enjoy the calming vibe of this very unusual village on the coast of Maine. My guest next week is going to be Virginia Milner. She is Principal Product Manager for Kindle Vella. So we'll have a chance to really explore that new platform in talking with her. Because of a family schedule conflict here in Ocean Park, I'm not going to be able to talk with the regular Clubhouse gang on Monday this coming week. Instead, next week's After the Pod Convo will be held at Clubhouse on Tuesday, July 20th. It'll be at the usual time, 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, but Tuesday, not on Monday. And I'm going to reach out to there's about 4 of us that get together for great conversations, and I'll reach out to you individually as well to remind you of the change. And if you'd like to join us, you'll find a link in the show notes at thekindlechronicles.com. So now I'll tell you about the change coming ahead for the Kindle Chronicles. I've noticed in the past that many of the podcasts I admire divide themselves into seasons, like television series. And one advantage of this, it means that there are parts of the year when there are no new episodes. And I think the people putting on these podcasts use that time to maybe take a break, relax, plan the next season. And so as I deepen my exploration of the unplugged life this summer, I've decided to do something similar with the Kindle Chronicles. So next week's episode will be the concluding one for a very long 13-year season, which began on July 26, 2008. So that will be 13 years as of this July 26th. Season 2 will begin on Friday, September 10th, and that will be 2 days after the conclusion of my See You in September sabbatical, my 90 days off the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and most of my regular news subscriptions. Between the seasons, I will explore possible changes to the show, but I think it'll mainly be a 1-month pause in the proceedings. August is my birthday month. I'll turn 71 on August 30th, so that appeals to me as a time between seasons. If you have any suggestions for what Season 2 might look like, I hope you'll consider sending me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com. I do intend to keep posting my morning journal entries on the Alexa Flash Briefing Network. These flash briefings generally are available by 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Monday through Friday, and they consist of 5 minutes or less reflections on the day ahead or something I've been paying attention to in a number of areas from technology to contemplative prayer. To hear them on your Alexa device or app, just say, Alexa, enable morning journal. And then after that, you can hear the latest episode at any given day by simply saying, Alexa, flash. Thank you for making Season 1 of the Kindle Chronicles an absolutely, unbelievably satisfying adventure for me, and I hope for those of you listening. We've traveled a long way since the first year after the introduction of the Kindle and talked about a lot of things, and I plan to continue the talking after taking August off. So I'll see you in September. Thanks for listening. Bye.